Welcome to Tropic Topics Season 3. We have an area of interest. Really, we have a low pressure system, 91L, just off to our south. It gave us a little bit more than we expected, at least in the overnight presentation. Dry air and shear are still working on this thing, so we'll see if it does develop, but it's got better odds than it has throughout this week, and that's what you see there. The green just off to the south of Panama City. All the orange highlighted there is dry air, so you can clearly tell the dry air is impacting the system as well as the upper level shear too. So anyways, we're going to talk all kinds of weather fun stuff for Tropic Topics Season 3, and in a True Friends theme, this one is just named The First One.
The first one.
The first one. I thought it was more fun to name them like Friends style instead of being like Arlene, like we usually do. And so the first one could be like the one about Arlene.
There you go. That's a good one.
Let's see.
Just keep the theme going all season long.
Yeah,
why not?
All season long. Yeah, I like it. Well, if you don't know, I am Ross Whitley. I'm the chief meteorologist here at WMBB, and we've got Kristen Kennedy. She is the morning meteorologist here at WMBB, and we will be doing this exactly the same way we did it last year. So you're going to have to pay attention to when activity is ongoing. That's when we're going to jump on here and give you that information, because honestly, hurricane season can be quite boring whenever there is absolutely nothing going on. And if there's nothing going on, we have nothing to talk about, and you don't want us to show up every Thursday and tell you nothing.
Yeah.
You want us to
We're
tell
just
you
going
something.
to rant mode like we do sometimes.
Yeah, that's really what it would be. It would just be Ross and Kristen complaining. So let's not do that. We'll jump right into it. Kristen, you want to kick us off since we just got done with our midday show, and so she is up
should
to
know
date.
everything, right?
You should be all over it.
Yeah, so we're watching this area of low pressure just to our south. We do have some moisture still with it, but we're starting to notice its shift down towards the south as well. Visible satellite imagery here showing kind of a little bit better organization over the past 12 or so hours, especially as you can see more of the clouds starting to take a circular shape there, and a little bit of an area of rotation, or more of a core, I should say, developing on the south side of the system. Most of the convection on the north and east side, and we certainly have seen some shower and storm activity from this area of low pressure as well, especially overnight, lasting through the early morning hours. But right now, there's not too much ongoing across the Panhandle. If anything, we're seeing a few showers along Franklin County and the Forgotten Coastline and up through Jackson County. A lot of the moisture is going to be eclipsed and cut off by dry air coming in from the northeast over the next couple of days, especially as the system will track down towards the south. However, later in the day, we may have some outflow coming in from the north, and with the moisture of the environment that we're currently in, as well as energy of the sun and our daytime heating, we could still see some scattered pop-up shower and storm activity. So we're not ruling out that rain chance here in the Panhandle for the next, I'd say, maybe 12 or so hours. Then after that, it really doesn't look like any significant rainfall will come from the system. We can't see it, but there is an area of high pressure to our north that's going to be starting to build in, and it's going to lead to a southward shift in this low. So usually we track these lows and they come to the north, but this is going to be tracking and retreating down towards the south and east, more so towards the peninsula of Florida through the end of the work week and into the weekend, which could provide some rainfall down there. But for us, we will be dealing with a little bit drier trend as we work in towards the weekend. So we do have an update from the National Hurricane Center. They have given this now about a 50% chance of tropical development. Again, whether or not it turns into a tropical depression or a tropical storm, our forecast here in the Panhandle is not going to change. It is shifting south. Drier air will be coming in, so that tropical development here will not really be a concern. But for other areas down to our south and east, flooding could be a threat, especially with some tropical downpours. There's a lot of water vapor with this system, and as we get those pop-up showers and storms with the convection around the system shifting away from us, flooding could be a little bit more of a concern again, but not necessarily here for the Panhandle. Radar right now just showing you where we do have a few spotty showers working in. You can see more of that west-northwesterly flow along the coastline of the Forgotten Coast, Franklin County, Gulf County, a few spotty showers there, also through Liberty County and up north of I-10 in Jackson County. But overall, a lot drier trend right now, and probably probably going to see more of that as we head into the afternoon.
Yeah, I woke up this morning and saw the what was kind of a surprise to see the structure look as good as it did, because late last night it looked like this thing was just completely falling apart. Of course, have to keep in mind that the maximum is over the water at night, and during the day you have the minimum. So it's flipped over land for us. We get the heating of the day, we get pop-up showers and thunderstorms. Over water, the least amount of instability happens during the day because you got the heat baking the air, and that really creates that lapse rate closer to the water and dissipates the lapse rate aloft. So certainly at night that flips because the water temperature is still relatively warm, the air cools, so you get a steeper lapse rate over there. That's just change in temperature with height. That's what lapse rate means. So because I know I'm fancy talk, I'm talking right over everyone's head here. Hurricane hunters are going out at 1 Central to investigate this. Basically, they're going to fly through it, get a better idea for the models of what's going on in the structure. It looks like on radar that this thing is more organized than it actually is, because all of the convection, the mid-level center and upper-level center, they're not together. The low-level center is actually south of where all of the convection is, and the mid-level center is where all of the convection is, and the upper-level center is actually off to the west of all of this as well. So it is tilted, to say the least, which is not the greatest structure for a system. So we'll likely see the structure look worse as the day goes throughout, and then we'll probably see it blow back up and try to wrap up. If this thing is going to make it to a tropical storm status, it's probably going to be tonight, would be my guess. If it doesn't do it tonight, then it probably won't be able to do it. It may have another attempt at it Friday night, and before really the drier air and shear just rip this thing
Wraps
apart.
it up, yeah.
Yeah, because that's what's going to happen. That's also why you haven't heard a whole lot of hype or people really being
too concerned about
this anywhere, because it's just going to meander around the Gulf of Mexico for a couple of days and then dissipate. So everyone's just kind of like, oh, look, start a hurricane
If anything,
season.
yeah, I was going to say, if anything, it's just a signal that, hey, things could get going. So it's a good time to have your preparations. And today is the beginning of the Atlantic hurricane season, June 1st. So I know we're not going to get a whole lot out of this, but it is always a good reminder that you should be prepared. Now's the time to start looking for those updates and reliable sources as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that time of year. We start paying attention to every little swirl over the water, and any front that gets into the Gulf of Mexico, we don't trust it from this point forward. So yeah, it's just a good early season reminder. The nice thing about the better structure to this is obviously on the radar here, there's far less moisture across the panhandle today than if this had been a looser, broader system. It would have been slinging moisture back our way. So still expecting a pop-up shower thunderstorm or two this afternoon, but rain chances have been reduced by about 20-30%. So down to about 40, maybe 50% along the coast. And the further inland you go, the lower your rain chances are going to be as we get into this afternoon. You can almost see the influence of the backdoor front here. It's actually up north and east of Albany. If you look at the last couple of frames there, you can kind of see some of that convection fading that's between Albany and, what is that, Americus or Eastman, whatever that is.
Moultrie. And
yeah. So right there, you can see that convection fading, and that is because that dry air is undercutting it. So that'll work its way in through this afternoon and hopefully really clear us out. So those that are concerned about Gulf Coast jam forecasts, things are looking certainly better. If you got any questions, comments, or concerns, we actually get all of our questions now put in thanks to our wonderful digital person here, which is Spencer. He's with us again this year, and all of these wonderful graphics and transitions and all these things that you see going on, it's all because of him. Yeah, all of the nice work, he's the one that did it. So we're just taking the credit. But
we're just talking weather. He's working the behind the scenes.
He's actually doing all the stuff. But if you had any questions, comments, concerns, anything, you can post them anywhere you are watching from, and we should be able to see them. I've got my Facebook page pulled up, so I've already seen the Hurricane Hunters question as well as the many people that are watching. Thanks for joining us, and we're going to start to dive in now to the season ahead. And the main talking point has been El Nino and the emergence of El Nino. And many people don't know what it means other than the SNL skit that I think Chris Farley did, which was El Nino, what did he say? The Nino. That's what he called it. Yes.
Well, he has half of it. El means the in Spanish.
Yes,
so.
I got that. But of course, with the last 3 years, we have had a La Nina pattern, and this year we are flipping to an El Nino pattern, and it looks likely that we're going to rival probably one of the strongest El Ninos we've had in the past. And that has implications that are broad, much broader than just hurricane season, because it does a lot of things during the winter time as well as during the summertime. And in fact, it may have more impact on the winter than it does for the summer months. The main impact from the summer months is what you see right here: weaker trade winds, so the water continues to get warmer and warmer, which is going on right now. It also adds more moisture and heat content to the equatorial regions. So across northern South America as well as Central America, you have much warmer temperatures than you would expect for even the summer months. And yes, it is warm and humid there basically year round, but I promise you, if you ask the people in Latin America or northern South America, they're probably going to go with, yeah, it's been hot. It's been really hot, like much hotter than normal. And what that does is we get a very active Eastern Pacific. So you get a lot of storms to develop on the Eastern Pacific side, and that throws a lot of shear back across the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico. So that activity hasn't started yet, but it probably will within the next couple of weeks, which will be pretty early season for them to get started, because they typically start seeing the Eastern Pacific crank up as we get toward the end of June. Mm-hmm. And this time it looks like we're going to get probably a storm there maybe in the next couple of weeks. And once that starts happening, Caribbean gets shut down, Gulf of Mexico gets shut down, and you have far less storm activity going on out there. It also increases the trade winds across the rest of the Atlantic, which increases vertical wind shear. If you don't know what vertical wind shear is, that just means that we are suppressing anything that is trying to rise. So we're creating a whole lot of issues for low pressure systems that try to work their way across the Gulf of Mexico. The main other factor that is contributing against us this year is that the waters are really warm. So that kind of negates some of that vertical wind shear, but you have other issues to worry about as well. And the opposite is true during the middle ground is true during a neutral pattern season. That's when we really don't have La Nina or El Nino. So normal trade winds, normal waters, and you get up usually above activity in both basins. Just depends. It kind of trade off, and you can have an average season there as well. And then, of course, the last 3 years, we have had a La Nina pattern, which is stronger trade winds on the Eastern Pacific and more hurricane activity in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico. I don't think that's news to anyone. Since 2020, we have had La Nina, or rather 2019. So 2019 was an above average season. 2020 was a hyperactive season. 2021 was an above average season. And then last year we started to come down from La Nina, and we ended up with a normal season. So we were right at the average, which is 14 named storms. And if you're wondering, this year also going with 14 named storms, at least NOAA is, that's right around where they give a range. Colorado State University gives a different timeline as well. They give less of a range. They actually give a number. But we want to talk timeline too. So when do you make decisions? Well, we have this timeline that you have seen quite a while. I have used this for several years, and we'll use it again this year. And it kind of just goes through your checklist of when you do need to make those decision-making process. But you should always have the kit ready to go. And be watching the weather from the beginning of hurricane season to the end of hurricane season. Anytime we start talking tropical activity, you should be paying attention to the weather. And then 3 to 5 days out, that's when things start to get real. If you're in the cone 3 to 5 days out, that's when you want to make sure that your plan is ready and you're going through those mental preparations on what to do if the storm does come in that direction. But you're really not in go mode yet. That's more or less just paying attention to the weather, paying attention to what's going on. Days 1 through 3. I know everybody wants to have 7 days of watching a storm. That doesn't happen very often. You get 1 to 3 days at most. So days 1 through 3, that's when you're going to put in all of those action plans in place. That's when it's time to either make that decision, yeah, I'm going to go, or no, I'm going to stay. If you're not going to be impacted by storm surge and you don't think the wind is going to be worrisome enough to impact your home, or trees that are going to fall around your home, then certainly, you can make that decision that's best for you at that point in time. But yeah, that's it. That's all you really get is 3 days. Everybody wants 7 days or 5 days, and rarely does that actually happen. So we've broken that down a little bit better, and Kristen's going to walk you through it here with this activity. But basically, we wanted to give you a day-by-day timeline opposed to just what I was doing there with those 1 through 3, because obviously we've got limited space with those graphics. So we've got a better idea here on the timeline.
Yeah, this will kind of tell you like a little bit more detailed preparation of what you need to be doing each day out. So 6 days out is still pretty far away to really tell where a tropical system may end up and what its impacts may be, because as you know, the cone, the forecasting cone will likely change because the forecast is still not really reliable. So at this point, we want to let you know that you don't need to believe all the forecast models. You're going to see a lot of things coming through. We're going to convey it as best as we can. And certainly don't believe everything you see on social media. Obviously, Ross and I, we try to do our best with the forecasting techniques there, but sometimes you'll run across other people or other sites, other news stations, whatever it may be, that will give you everything that the models may be throwing out. And again, they're models for a reason. They're just guidance. It's not true fact. It's something to help you with the forecasting technique of it.
Yeah, you have to keep in mind too, we're all playing a game here, and that game is called attention. And social media, that's how you win the game, is by getting the most attention. So people are going to throw out scary solutions, and I'm not just talking about the meteorologists or people that like to call themselves meteorologists or social media individuals that talk about weather on social media. I'm talking about actual meteorologists in other markets, like say Minnesota. I've seen individuals in Michigan posting tropical models out on social media because they want attention. So certainly we're all playing that attention game. So 6+ days out, no matter where you're seeing it from, you should look at it with a little bit of skepticism, because you're likely going to see, if not significant changes, you might not see that storm there at all. And once the time we get to 6 days out, it may be gone at that point in time. So, I'm talking about the 240 to 384 hour out type of solutions that we get posted to social media throughout hurricane season. It's just lunacy.
Yeah.
Like, that's fantasy land. Things will absolutely change between now and when that time does arrive.
So basically, like 6 days out, even 5 days out, don't panic. Okay. You might see things that are wild looking to you, but it's not a time to panic. It's a time to start making maybe preparations, at least identifying what a game plan could be for you, and certainly making more of a habit to check your local sources or whatever reliable source that you choose to use. Save your emotional energy for later. Don't freak out. Harbor that in by day 4.
Yeah,
maybe
that's
you might want to start.
That's really the
digging
idea
into
behind
it.
posting this timeline here, is just, get the idea that you get 3 days. Be comfortable with 3 days. You don't need 6, 7, 8, 9 days to prepare. You need 3, especially if you're prepped ahead of time.
Yeah, if you already have your kit and you already have a game plan and a structure of what needs to be done to activate that, you don't need anything past 3 days.
Yeah, in reality, you can probably get most of what you need done in 2 days.
And that's why we tell you to have these preparations already made, so that when it's 6 days out, when it's 5 days out, when it's 4 days out, you are not running around crazy. You are not stressing beyond all belief. You already have a game plan. It's just a matter of putting those plans into action.
Yeah, because if you're stressed at day 7 and day 8,
it's going to be a really rough week.
It's going to be a long week.
I mean, it's going to be stressful anyways, because you're dealing with Mother Nature and natural elements, but you want to try to alleviate some of that, at least emotional drainage, because it could be a very long week regardless.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So within 5 days, you want to use extra caution when you're looking at the cone. Of course, the cone always has a margin of error. So that is why we always try to stress that you want to look at the cone, but you also want to look around the cone. There's potential that it could go either way. You want to make sure you are starting to review some spaghetti plots, what the many, many different models are trying to pinpoint. Now, of course, those spaghetti plots, even 5 days out, could be very wrong. So you just want to take into consideration maybe what more of the models are starting to look like, where they could possibly end up, and really just continue to look at everything with caution. Now, 4 days out is when we start to pinpoint a little bit more of what the specific impacts to general area may be. and start to talk about what your worst case scenario may be and what your best case scenario would be. You'll probably hear us talking about the worst case more, simply because we want you to be prepared for the worst. We want you to have that game plan and action for what the worst possible case scenario of the storm system in your area may specifically be. Of course, always hoping for the best case scenario, but it's better to be prepared for the worst, because if the worst doesn't happen, you're going to think it's easy peasy lemon squeezy compared to what could be a bad situation.
Yeah, and when we try to forecast, we look at, that's what we do, is we break down 3 different types of scenarios. We say, okay, this is the worst case scenario, things that can, if everything goes right meteorologically, meaning everything works together and works out and goes right for the storm, this is what could happen. And then we start to go backwards and we go, okay, what's the least likely thing to happen? And then we work back toward the middle, and that's really where we come up with our forecast solution. But certainly we're going to talk middle to higher end, because that's what we want you to be prepared for. Certainly don't want you to be caught off guard about anything, but we're always going to try to come at you with a sense of reality and give you 3 solutions, like what's least likely, what's most likely, and then what is possible out of this system. And that's how we try to approach the forecast, because, you know, we're not perfect, we're humans. And we're going to make mistakes, and we're looking at weather data that is constantly changing. I always say forecasting tropical systems is like trying to forecast a pinball in a pinball machine after the next 3 flipper hits. So you're trying to forecast not when you hit the ball, but when you hit the ball, where it goes off the bumper, where it comes back down, after you hit it again, and then after you hit it again. That's what you're trying to do with a hurricane, especially when you have a ton of variables in there. So obviously, we're playing a massive guessing game based on the solutions that we know and the variables that are in play. So the least amount of variables, the more likely we're going to get the forecast really right. The more variables that are involved, the more we're going to go, yeah, there's a lot that could possibly happen here. And a good example of that is exactly what's going on right now. You've got an upper level trough, you have a surface trough, you have a backdoor front, you have an area of low pressure around the Carolinas. All of those things are massive variables to the system that is in the Gulf of Mexico at the current moment. Now, obviously, you know, worst case scenario there is that this becomes a tropical storm and then it fades in the Gulf of Mexico. So, you know, no worries about that. But you get the idea. The more variables, the more complicated the forecast becomes.
And additionally, just touching base off of that, we're going to start to give you an estimated timeline. Now it's day 4. Okay, so it's not going to be legit. It's not going to be down to the wire. We're going to give you what a general timeline may be, and we're going to talk about the earliest arrival time of the wind specifically and other impacts, because you want to be prepared for it well ahead of time, because we know these systems can speed up. Sometimes they can slow down, but it's better to be early, or it's better to be ready early than ready too late, and then the impacts are on your doorstep and you are not really prepared for that. So day 4 is really when you need to start looking a lot more and looking not only at the forecast, the arrival time, where exactly it may be headed, and what the impacts for your area will be. Day 3 is where we start to really prepare for more of those impacts and try to nail it down a little bit better. Now, by day 3, we're going to have a better understanding from some of the forecast models. As Ross has mentioned, though, there could still be a lot of ingredients that could make day 3 forecasting pretty hard.
Right.
There are some instances in which case we don't really have a good idea of where something may end up until about day 2, and that's only 24 to 48 hours to really get any type of plan in action very quickly.
Yeah, Ian is a good example of that last year, because Ian really wasn't all that difficult of a forecast based on the storm. We knew what the storm was going to do, basically. But we didn't really have an idea of where it was going to go because of the angle of approach. You think about the shape of Florida and the angle of approach, meaning it was less than a 15-degree angle coming across Cuba to where it was going to go on the Florida Peninsula. So a wobble to the left, 15 miles, takes the storm up near Tampa. They wobble to the right and you get a much sharper, and it ends up in the Everglades, or goes across the Keys and hits Miami. So even though we know how it played out and what ended up happening, the angle of approach makes it much more difficult. And then you add in other variables and it makes the forecast even more difficult. So day 3 last year with Ian, we were still talking about the possibility of
there was such a wide stretch of
there was a possibility it was going to end up in the bin.
It was basically like, hey, if you are in the state of Florida, have a game plan and like really be ready to move on.
It really could have ended up all the way up near the bend area. So if it had just wobbled slightly off to the left, that would have happened. And certainly some of the models out there gave some crazy solutions too, like the system coming back across our area, which really never made sense to us here because there was a cold front coming in. So tropical systems don't ignore cold fronts. They get impacted by them. So that was always weird to me. But certainly there are all of those variables, and day 3 can still be a question mark, but we're going to have a much better idea of what the storm looks like and what the storm could do, even if we don't know exactly where it's going to make landfall.
And its intensity. If it is going to be likely strengthening, then we can prepare you for what kind of winds you'll likely be dealing with, rainfall, storm surge, and the like. And I also want to add additionally, with the forecasting cone that the National Hurricane Center does put out, don't focus on that center line. I know a lot of people just look at the center, where's the center of the storm going to go? But that cone is to tell you that the center could be anywhere within that cone, and even additionally could be outside of the cone.
I mean, that's what the error is there. 198 miles of error at day 3 is the average from the cone of uncertainty. So that's telling you the cone is only representing where 75% of that tropical system should be. So that means the center could be outside of the cone, and the cone would technically still be a correct forecast.
Yeah. Based off of that.
Based off of that error. So,
and
gotta love it.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Love doing weather.
Yeah, that's right.
Sometimes just
it's all about percentages.
Yeah. Also by day 3, so you'll probably start to hear more alerts from government officials on day 3 as well, in regards to possible evacuation orders. At this point, you really want to make sure you're having your gas and your fuel tanks definitely set up. You don't want to rush at the pump. That's probably going to be an issue. You'll probably start to hit a lot of traffic because even though day 3 out, we'll have a better idea of what may be happening, people will evacuate earlier, even without issuance from government officials. So you should be prepared. If you are going to evacuate, or if you have that evacuation order, start to be patient, but certainly better to get out sooner rather than later, because as the days go on, we get from day 3 to then day 2 and possibly even just day 1, you're going to run into more of an issue with people flocking to the roadways, traffic jams, rush to the pump, and really people who have not properly prepared, trying to make those last minute preparations to keep their life and property safe. So by day 2, that's certainly the deadline day. Whatever you are planning to do, you need to have that decision made. You need to have that game plan. You need to identify things that you should be putting into action at this point. There needs to be, at this point, more confidence in the overall wind and rain impact. We'll certainly know a lot more by day 2. And you really, really, really need to stay, I'd say, glued to your TVs, maybe the website, whatever it is where you find your reliable sources of weather information, but also government official information, the sheriff's office, whether that be local city officials. I know everyone around here starts putting out updates, which is really important because you have so many reliable sources and critical information regarding where sandbagging may be going on, where the best place to evacuate is, and even for people who could be visiting the area and have no idea what to do. There's a lot of ways to get help, but by day 2, you really need to have it together.
It's decision day. It says deadline day. You can turn that into decision day too, because that's the day that you need to act. So day 2 and day 3, that's when, if day 3 is a high confidence day, we're like, hey, we're pretty certain about this. Like there's not a whole lot of variables here. We know. Then you can turn that into decision day. But day 2 really is decision day. It's like, okay, I had a plan. I've done my thought process. I've got an overall idea of what the forecast is going to be, and this could be a high impact event for us. We need to go. That's what you do at day 2. And you really should be paying attention because we have seen it within, with Michael, really. Day 3, day 2, and day 1, we saw rapid changes because we knew in the forecast it was constantly being echoed that rapid intensification was possible. I mean, that was being echoed for days, that RI was likely going to happen. So with that, you can see massive changes in the forecast within a very short period of time, which is why it is just so important to check the forecast routinely, especially as we have a tropical system approaching, because the forecast is going to change. So a lot of variables, there's a lot of things going on, and systems organize. Speaking of which, we did get an update from the National Hurricane Center. As of 1 o'clock, they now have given it a 70% chance of developing. So they're saying that a tropical depression or tropical storm will likely form within the next 48 hours. They continue to echo the sentiment that this is going to be a brief tropical system and that dry air and unfavorable conditions develop by the time we get into the weekend. So regardless of whether this gets a name or a number, it will not change our forecast at all. So if anything, it's just a number added to the list. That's about it. Or we just check a name off the list, or we check a number off the list, because this could just be tropical depression 1 if it doesn't continue to develop. We'll have to monitor the trends as we go throughout the day, but it is certainly possible, and now they're saying there is even a high chance of that happening, which is not out of the realm of possibility. So 24 hours out, we're going to be watching for wobbles and looking at the potential effects as well. And we're going to be talking about whether there's any last minute intensifications. We're going to be talking about the tornado threat, the flash flood threat. We're definitely going to be giving you the storm surge area and who's going to be most impacted by that, as well as the inundation height. So when we give you storm surge numbers, we're not telling you what the water is going to be up to. So we're not telling you this is where sea level is going to be. We're telling you inundation. So that is water above ground is those numbers. So when you see 1 to 2 feet, we're saying 1 to 2 feet above ground. So not sea level, not 1 to 2 feet above sea level, 1 to 2 feet inundation. That's what those numbers mean. And then you have to keep on mind, on top of that, you have wind. So you're going to have waves on those waters too. So that is the unfiltered water level that will bounce up and down. So 1 to 2 feet means 1 to 2 feet of water rise. And then you have wave heights on top of that. So certainly we're going to be giving you all of those details as well. And it holds true. I know Michael scarred all of us with wind because we had so many trees around. A lot of people had trees fall on their homes and they had damages from that. But the saying really is, hide from the wind, run from the water, because people don't survive the water. We had a lot of people here survive the wind, even though, Michael was probably not the best storm to stay through. Sheltering, you did survive the wind, even though it did do catastrophic damage across our area. Again, if a major hurricane is being forecasted and we're 24 hours out, at the top of my mind would be evacuation.
If we could.
That would be, yeah. I mean, we're stuck here. So
yeah, we'll be here.
There's nothing we can do about it, but certainly
if you can
take the option to get out of here. And if you have the resources and have the ability to do so, then that is a high suggestion, especially whenever the letter M is on the cone.
We don't like that.
Yeah, we don't like that. We don't like
that
the
means
letter
major.
M. Yeah, the letter M is major. That's 3, 4, and 5, and I don't care if it's a 3. If it's a major hurricane and you're in the eye wall of a 3, you're going to feel like it's catastrophic.
Right. And you shouldn't focus also on the numbers or the major or category distinction, because if it's slow moving.
Yeah, Sally, for example.
It can produce massive rainfall, flooding, winds can still be an issue. And if it's fast moving, there's still going to be an issue. So that you should really focus on the impacts. Don't think like, oh, it's just a Cat 3. I don't need to leave because I lived through a Cat 3 a few years ago.
Right.
You need to focus on the
Maybe
impact
low-lying
of that
area
forecast.
and we're forecasting 17 inches of rain.
Right.
I'd probably leave.
Right.
I don't want to be hanging out.
Don't just look at your sources and say, oh, it's just a Cat 2, it's just a Cat 3.
Right.
You need to focus on that.
We saw that with Fred and Sally.
Yeah, on those impacts.
Fred brought 10 inches of rain in a very short period of time. Sally brought 15 inches of rain on average across the panhandle. So certainly impacts can be far more significant than the number being represented. So
exactly.
That is certainly one to pay attention to. And at landfall, it's now casting. At that point in time, there's no
hunker down.
Yeah, there's no more us telling you what's going to happen. We're just telling you
where it's happening. Yeah.
That's it at that point in time. So what we're going to be talking about is basically us on the wall talking about the radar and what's going on, because there's no more forecasting at that point in time.
It's now just casting, which is what's happening right now.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So that is our timeline, and this is a nice, pretty summary of all of them, and we will post this graphic out on our social media for you so that you can have it, you can print it off, you can save it, and if you're fancy enough right now, you can screenshot it yourself. But certainly we'll have this graphic up there for you so that you can have a good idea of how to make the decisions and the timeline to make decisions, especially if you're new to the area, because we had a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, move to the area over the last 2 years or so. And with that, there's a lot of people that have never experienced tropical coverage, and we're not here for Michael, and we're not here for Sally. So they probably haven't been through much on the tropical end. So certainly this is a good reminder of when to make decisions and how to make decisions based on the timeline of the overall forecast. But again, we'll post this on our social media so you can have it. I do want to take a quick look back at last year's season and remind you of the numbers for this year. So the National Hurricane Center is going with a near average season. Basically, all that means is an average season. That's what they're forecasting. I don't know why. There must be some kind of psychological aspect behind saying near average instead of average.
It just gives you a chance that it could be plus or minus.
Yeah,
the average,
I guess that's what that is, right? So it's a statistics thing. So once again, percentages, right?
It's all about the terminology, right?
I guess. I don't know. That just kind of perturbs me a little bit. Like, just call it an average season. Don't, why say near average? But I guess you're right, because that does give flexibility.
There's probably like a percentage that's like a 0.6 in there too, so they can't round up or down. Or like, I don't know.
Are you going back to being scarred by your constants and all of the crazy formulas that we had to learn in college?
I try not to think of those.
Yeah, I'd suppress those.
Nightmares.
That's terms for my therapist, right? But looking at last year's season, we did have 14 named storms. We had 3 landfalls we had 4 landfalls in the United States. Alex, Nicole, Colin, and Ian. If you don't remember Alex year to the date. So last year, this day, was about a day and a half off the coast of Fort Myers. So not unusual to have a tropical system right at the beginning of the season, and not unusual to look the way it does look at the current moment, which is sloppy and broad and not all that impressive.
It was nice, at least last year, the first A storm waited till June.
That's true.
The past few years, it was
that's
beforehand.
2 years prior to that. It was in May. Yeah, that's true. So we can have tropical activity at any point in time. In fact, they went back and said that an unnamed storm is going to be counted as a storm this year as well. It didn't get a name, and so therefore they can't
cross off the A name.
Yeah, they can't do it post, but they gave a subtropical storm in January. So yeah, it can happen at any point in time throughout the year. It's just typically environmental conditions don't allow it, other than our typical hurricane season, which is when we have hurricane season. So a little closer look at the storms that did make landfall here. Alex, like I said, didn't officially form until it got on the Atlantic side of the peninsula, but it did work across basically just off to the south of Fort Myers as potential tropical cyclone 2, 3, something like that. I don't remember. I just remember it was a PTC as it worked across, potential tropical cyclone, as it worked across the peninsula, and then became the first official storm once it got into the Atlantic. And crossing the Gulf Stream, it made a run at becoming a hurricane. It got all the way up to 70 miles per hour, and the lowest pressure down to 934. And then obviously the most impactful storm of the year was Ian. And fortunately for us, you can tell that angle of approach, it did just stay on that line to the right, but with that angle, just a little slight wobble to the left, and it would have been much further up the coast. And same thing to the right, it's much further down the coast. So sometimes just storm angle plays a major role in the forecast. And storm surge is just a major issue anytime a storm is approaching the western coast of the peninsula. The western coast of the peninsula, unlike the Panhandle that actually has some decent amount of elevation. I mean, you go from Panama City Beach to Back Beach Road and you gain 30 feet of elevation. That doesn't exist down the peninsula.
It's all flat.
It is as flat as it can be. I mean, the 12.7 max storm surge that happened at Fort Myers Beach, that went in over a mile. The storm surge went in over a mile, and that was 12.7. For reference, Michael produced 15 feet of storm surge, and it only went a few blocks inland. So not nearly the length inland that you get down on the peninsula. So anytime there's a storm approaching the peninsula, storm surge is a major, major, major key to the forecast, regardless of whether it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If it's a big storm and it's a category 1, that's going to produce significant storm surge. If it's a slow moving storm and it's a category 1 and it's a big one, it will produce significant storm surge. So again, paying attention to the impacts of what the storm is going to create certainly is the most important thing that you can do. Also, Nicole is how we wrapped up the season last year. Actually, there might have been a storm after that, but I think it was way out in the Atlantic. I don't really remember. The storms that are not going to impact
they're like
the
fish
U.S.
storms, we really forget
don't
them
pay
pretty
attention
easily.
to them.
Yeah,
I look at them, especially if they're a pretty storm. Like if it's a really pretty storm, I think there was a W name storm a couple years back that was just gorgeous. It stayed out in the Atlantic. I think it was Wilford or something like that, right? I don't know.
I don't know, honestly.
Anyways, if they're really pretty, then I pay attention to them. But if they're not, if they're just a storm in the Atlantic, then who really cares? Unless you're a boat or a fish, then you might care.
Yeah.
But I don't.
We're like, good, go somewhere else.
Yeah. We remember Nicole because we were actually on the dry side of Nicole. And we had a nice cool breeze, much like we do today. Had a nice cool breeze and a couple passing showers, but ended up being a pretty nice couple of days, all thanks to Nicole late in the season. So unfortunately for the peninsula, they had just dealt with Ian not too long before that. I think it was like 40 days between the two storms. And the Daytona Beach area, Space Coast had massive erosion from Ian. And then they got another one with a big sloppy subtropical system turned tropical at the last minute that just kept the erosion going. So again, big storms, and just depending on what the storm looks like and what the storm's doing, the impacts can be massive depending on just the storm shape and storm approach. So don't always focus on the number, because Nicole is a good example of that as well. So that is a look back at the season. I think that's my last slide. I think that's it. So we're going to wrap it up right there. But what we'll do is we're going to go back over toward where am I going back to? I don't know.
The days of preparation, or the...
That's what I was going to go back to. Yeah, right there. So anyways, we're going to leave this up for you. If you didn't have a chance to screenshot it, you can do that now. If you've got any questions or anything like that, we'll take a little bit of time to answer those questions, but we've been talking for quite a while now, so we'll probably wrap this up pretty shortly. But if you got questions that I didn't get to, or something, or information, we will try to go through those here very, very quickly. Again, we can ingest those and throw those right up on the screen. So what you got for me, Spencer? What's the first question?
I have no question. I just want to give a shout out to our Tropic Topics
super fan Sandy.
Super fan.
I don't think I can handle another cat five hurricane.
You and me both. I don't think I could handle it too. Hopefully we don't have anything like that. But keep in mind that even though the season is forecasted to be average,
all it takes is one bad storm.
Yeah, and the statistics for tropical activity are the same, regardless of what the forecast for the season is and what setup we have. We have the same exact odds every single year of being impacted by the tropical system. So just because we had a system, say last year or the year before that, doesn't mean that we won't get one this year. And just because Michael was relatively recent doesn't mean that we won't have a major hurricane here in the next couple of years or even this year. So certainly you want to prepare every season like you do for the season prior, regardless of what the preseason forecast is or the beginning of the season forecast, because you can have anything. It only takes one. We saw that with Ian last year. Ian, obviously the significant storm of the year. So just one storm is all it takes to have an impactful season. I mean, Andrew was late in the year. It was in September. It was the A-name storm. And it was a tropical storm 3 days before landfall. So get an idea there. Timeline, right? 3 days before landfall, you're prepping for impacts, and it's a tropical storm. And if you're not paying attention to the forecast, you go, it's just a tropical storm.
Exactly.
Right?
And
you don't make the right decision, and then it shows up and it's 24 hours out and it's a major hurricane, and you're like, what the heck?
Yep.
I didn't know this was going to happen. So
prepare for that worst case scenario.
Right. And Michael's similar situation. 3 days out, it was a tropical storm Cat 1. It was going from a tropical storm to a Category 1. So I got audio in my ear there.
I'm sorry.
I think you just played some audio back. So anyways, those are all important things too as well. I'm going through my timeline here. I'm not seeing a whole lot of questions on my end either. I won't give you an update on our tropical system that is to our south, or 91L at the moment. They're giving it a 70% chance of developing at this point in time. The hurricane hunters are going out there. They should be out there now, actually. They just likely flew out there here last couple of minutes. They'll be out there investigating it. And if they find something, then they will report that back. More than likely, they may give it they're probably not going to give it a PTC because it's not expected to impact land. So they may give it a number. It might be Tropical Depression 1 as we get our 4 o'clock update or 5 o'clock update for us. So it may be Tropical Depression 1 this afternoon, and we may even see Tropical Storm tonight. So that is quite possible. But rest assured, this is going to start to move south today. So The greatest impacts we had from it are really today in the marine conditions and yesterday with all the shower and thunderstorm activity we had. Other than that, we're not going to see any other real impacts from this. Choppy waters the next couple of days as that system's down there, especially if it continues to develop. But yeah, with that northeast wind,
it's going to be like almost a repeat of last weekend, just no cool air.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, it won't be as cool. It's going to be quite hot, actually.
Yeah, it's going to be quite toasty.
And the humidity's coming back, so sorry about that, too. It's already back. If you step outside.
But the water, I mean, like, there's a lot of people in town for Gulf Coast Jam and everything.
Oh, yeah,
the water, be out
the
water
will be
It's
nice.
going to be pretty calm.
It'll be nice, and make sure you're paying attention to the flags, because we probably will have at least some surf, even with that northeast wind, so we could have some rip current issues out there as well. That's always the case if there's a tropical system in the Gulf of Mexico, regardless of how close it is to us. So pay attention to the flags, pay attention to that kind of stuff. But the conditions overall, weather and near shore water should be pretty nice with that north wind. It'll knock down the waves and help us out quite a bit. So forecast looking good for Gulf Coast Jam and everything else. And we're going to continue to update you. And a reminder, once again, we're going to be doing Tropic Topics exactly the way we did it last year. So sometimes you'll see Kristen and sometimes you'll see me. Sometimes you'll see us with Jared as well. He's our weekend meteorologist, and he'll be joining us occasionally too when he is in and available for us to use. We'll do that too. And then, of course, Spencer, I think.
Spencer will probably be here all the time.
I will be here all the time. Just a reminder to get the 13 Now app and the Storm Track 13 app. You'll get alerts when we go live on Tropic Topics.
Yes, the Storm Track 13 app, a necessity corporate pitch from me, but is also a fantastic app. I use it all the time.
I do too. And I will say, like, I know it sounds like we're just plugging our own brand and our model, which we are, but this is the best weather app I have used personally for a station.
For
model,
free? I mean, because I have other apps that I use weather-wise that I pay for.
Yeah.
But for free, this is about as good as you're going to get data-wise, because you got tropical models. You can see where earthquakes are happening. You can see lightning strikes that are nearby.
You get lightning alerts too, which is great.
Alerts. You get push notifications from us with severe alerts. You get all kinds of stuff. And my alarm is telling me that it's time to get ready for work. Haha, alarm.
Oh, no more fun with the tropical stuff. You actually got to work now.
Haha, alarm. I'm already at work. Haha. But anyways, that's where we're going to wrap it up. So if you missed anything, if you're just joining us now, this is on Facebook. This will be posted to mypanhandler.com later on today, so you can check it out there as well. And if you're watching us from YouTube, thanks, because I didn't even know we had a YouTube channel before today. So hey, thank you to all the YouTubers out there. We are on the up and up. Also
Instagram. Wow.
I didn't even know
all over the place.
Do live on Instagram. That's how old I am. I'm getting old. I don't even know where you can go live anymore.
Are we still doing hashtags? Is that still a thing?
Is it still hashtag, or is nobody does
hashtag Tropic Topics?
People still do hashtag?
People do this?
They used to.
I don't know where you've been. I've never seen that. I do call
it. Help me out, Spencer. They used to do a hashtag.
That is a thing, but nobody else.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Spencer.
All right.
It's always a hashtag. It's no longer a pound sign. No one says that anymore.
Well, I'm just
You can do a tic-tac-toe.
Tic-tac.
All right, I think we should wrap it there.
We should wrap it up. Ross is getting silly.